Good morning, good afternoon, folks. Bob is going to run a little bit late today. He's driving home right now, so he'll join us in a bit. Looks like we are well on our way to quorum already. Everyone's still recovering from last week.
Ava, were you in Tahoe?
Yep.
How many people were there? I haven't seen too many tweets about it.
Total event was probably half the size of previous ones, like 250-ish.
Okay, cozy.
Yeah. The Friday OpenSSF board TAC meeting was a pretty big room. It's a pretty big board. So
good.
every time, crowd, every time. I haven't seen your tinfoil hat in a while.
Or the goose.
Or the goose.
Upstairs, sure. I unpacked it from Ireland and it's stayed on top of my dresser. So I probably need to bring that back down.
I dropped a link to our usual minutes location in the chat. Oh, that's a nice hat. Ducks. Like it. Very good. For those who are trickling in, Bob will be joining us in a little bit. I don't know exactly how long. He's just driving home right now from a meeting.
Ava, if you don't mind, I do want to quickly thank the TAC members who came to the governing board meeting last week. That was appreciated.
I think we can get started pretty soon. Bob asked me to just get the meeting going. We've got a couple, I think 2 groups presenting this morning. And he should be online in about 10 minutes or so.
Do we have Kim?
We don't.
No, so Kim couldn't make it today. She's dealing with sick kids. So she sent Bob this update last night, but I guess Bob's not here either. So I'm not sure if Bob was going to read it or just paste it in here.
I see some text in the meeting agenda.
Right.
That's what you mean. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So I will copy and paste it. I will copy and paste it in. Bob's chatting with me on the side while driving, which is definitely a safe thing to do. Chris, if you want to give your update, I will just paste in the update here from Kim.
Sure. This could be amazingly short. Can you see my screen? All right.
Bob just entered the room.
Oh.
But carry on. I mean, whatever you want to do, Ava, Bob.
Hey, Bob.
Shall I proceed?
Yeah, sorry, I don't see Bob in the room.
No
go ahead.
worries. This is the November TAC update on the Vulnerability Disclosures Working Group. As a reminder, we have a core set of initiatives we work on within the Vulnerability Disclosure SIG. We have a set of CVD personas and pain points for those personas. We have a vulnerability report standard set of metadata that we curate every once in a while. We primarily have been working on coordinated vulnerability disclosure guides. We have a developer maintainer guide. We also have a guide for security researchers / finders, and we have a future project where we'll focus on open source consumers. We work with the OSV team on the open source vulnerability schema. And then we have the open source security incident response team SIG, which has taken up the bulk of our attention the last few months. Right now, we are in between projects. We published the CVD guide for finders this summer, and the group is still deciding on what we would like to work on next. We have a couple projects in the hopper. Potentially, we'll work on that CVD guide with OSS consumers, which we got a lot of interest from the end user working group they might like to collaborate on. We also are potentially going to create some plugins or tooling to support the CVD guides, actually have ways to add some automation to some of the recommendations we have in our documentation. And then there was a request for potentially making a playbook for maintainers to help them handle incidents. So something that could be a quick set of checklists that people could walk through to help them make incidents a little smoother. So then we're kind of tinkering with those ideas right now. Predominantly, we have been focused on the open source security incident response team. I am pleased to report we should have the plan revisions done within the next few weeks, and we will get that over to the TAC for review. I would like that to be the end of November, but we'll see if my friends enable us to hit that deadline. And then we will, once the TAC provides notes, we will pass the plan on to the governing board for review and potential funding approval. And that was that for our update. Any questions I can answer for the group, the working group, or the SIG?
I had a question, C-Rob.
Yes.
So are we planning to publish any of the other guides soon? Like I know the one that is for the researchers is expected to go in the project repository, right?
It's all in the project repository right now. Everything we've written is publicly available. We've only written 2 guides so far.
Okay.
When we do the consumer one, if that's one of the projects we work on next, that'll be also in our Git repo.
I mean, from the critical projects perspective, like I remember the things have to go in that security.md file or that policy file, right? Are both of these supposed to go there or?
Could you restate the question, Abhishek?
So there is consumer guide and then there is a researcher guide, right?
That there's a developer maintainer guide and the finder guide. We don't have a consumer guide yet.
Okay, got it. Okay.
And then
That's
they're
fine.
basically, it's instructions or training on good practices around how to intake and manage vulnerabilities. And then for the finders, it's advice on how they can most effectively collaborate with the projects they're reporting to. So we do have templates. So like we do have an example security MD file in our repository. It's a resource that people can use. I think we also have a playbook for maintainers, but again, we're looking at potentially making more prescriptive guidance, like when a reporter comes to a maintainer, here's a checklist you can follow to actually, coordinate, so to speak. So that's another potential idea. We have not done any work on those yet.
But by the way, both of those guides are prominently displayed on the OpenSSF website resource page.
Right.
Thank you, Arnaud.
2 questions coming up from the chat. You sort of answered the first one, but I'm not sure. Does the researcher guide include etiquette on how to report or how to mass report vulnerabilities when working with maintainers, so as not to, flood them or come across poorly?
I don't know if we have specifics to that. The wonderful thing about the guides is they're all in delightful markdown file, and patches are always welcome. So if somebody had a suggestion or wanted to file an issue against it, we definitely could work on that. But I don't know if we talk about in general, here's how upstream, there's a couple different models, how upstream ingests vulnerabilities, and we provide advice to the researchers to basically set your expectations on what you're looking for out of this disclosure up front, and for both parties to kind of listen to each other as things are being triaged. But I don't know if I specifically addressed that, but file an issue for us. We'll be glad to make sure that gets addressed.
Thank you. And the second question was licensing on that awesome logo.
I have shared all of our mock-up logos with the OpenSSF marketing team for potential handing over to the creative team. And I'm working on a new one right now, a mergoose.
I am excited to see it. Dan.
Besides waterfowl, I was just wondering, in a proper serious question, you mentioned funding request for CERT, and I was just wondering if you could clarify for me, what's the funding going to fund when it comes to this thing? Is it like permanently staffing up an emergency response team with like jumpsuits and backpacks and stuff like that, or is it?
That'd be pretty cool.
What's it funding?
The group voted that we will be proposing a volunteer-based team. So we would ask the membership to donate resources to helping with these coordinations. There are a couple staff positions we are requesting, like a full-time program manager to help manage implementation of the plan, but then help with facilitation with the volunteers. It's predominantly for this particular stream. We will be asking for money for a couple FTEs, potentially tooling or cloud credits for infrastructure, because we'll need a bug intake tool potentially. And then there'll be a metric butt ton of volunteer hours that we will be asking for the foundation to pay. So we will need this many people for incident handling, this many people for advisory reporting, advisory writing, that type of thing. It's all broken down in the plan. You feel free to look at it. If you have any notes today, great, but we will officially be sending to the TAC, hey, we are ready, we're done, and we think this is our final proposal. Please give us final notes before we ask for funding.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing that and understanding a little bit more. I guess I should dive in before then to understand what sort of the function you're envisioning there is.
Anything else I could answer? I will work on adding a license to the image, and people are free to use it. And again, I am working with Jennifer to help to see if we can get in the queue for the creative team to actually make it official. That's just me doodling. Not quite as clean as what a professional artist is. I only want artists in my spare time.
They are currently with our creative services team, and they are currently inventorying all of the designs and styles that we have so far, and working on suggestions of moving forward and getting some good graphics for these different groups.
And welcome, Bob.
Awesome. Apologies for being late. I don't know where we are on the agenda, so I'll maybe just let you run with it for another minute or two, and then we'll.
Short version is Kim wasn't here, so I shared in the update that you'd copied in, and C-Rob just gave his update on the Vulnerability Disclosure Working Group. Went through some Q&A on that. I think we just finished with that. And next one would be the Diagrammer Society proposal.
So I sent an email to the TAC mailing list a couple months back and received a lot of interest about trying to find some way to graphically represent what the foundation is, what we do, how our parts connect. So from that, we spun up a small group of folks that have been providing feedback on a series of mock-up diagrams. We've gradually been adding more and more people, and I felt that we were to the point where we might want to make this kind of official instead of a part-time job. So I'm asking the TAC if they are interested in kind of formally adopting the Diagrammer Society as a SIG that we would report in and take direction from as we try to find ways to graphically embellish how we all snap in together. I've got us provisioned a GitHub repo. I have a mailing list for us. We have a Slack channel. And it's, again, we have a fairly steady engagement from the group. And I thought it might be interesting to actually get, like I've been talking with Bob around his proposal for the vision, which I think we're going to talk about in a couple items. And that might be a great task for this, to kind of task this group for, hey, how do we connect the vision to our existing layout as we continue to doodle?
Got it. So I guess any points of discussion or I guess or any questions? I have one, but I'll defer to others first. I don't see any hands. So Krob, I guess the question I have is, the SIG is reporting direct to the TAC, or would it sit underneath a specific working group?
My opinion is I think it would be best aligned directly under the TAC, since we are again trying to report about foundation level things and how all of our parts work together. And I fear if it was buried underneath another working group, it might not have the ability to have the breadth of connection. Mm-hmm. And again, I don't anticipate a lot of a burden on the TAC. We would do periodic report outs like we just did, and directly from, you get feedback provided to us about what the TAC needed to be able to articulate the foundation.
Makes sense. That's what I presumed, but I wanted just to make sure.
I for one support our new diagramming overlords.
So just looking here, based on when you sent that email, Krob, I guess what I would do then is I would make a motion to call a formal vote to admit this as a news. Oh.
Before that, so it looks like the charter is not yet filled out. And so before we do a formal vote, I think we should have a charter in place that defines the scope, especially to put this directly under the TAC. Krob, how would you feel? I have not thought this through for more than 5 seconds, of having the scope be sort of goal-oriented, so that once it is done, the TAC approves the output, the SIG doesn't go away, but is not a long-term, all-the-time activity. It can be spun back up whenever there's a need to update it, but it's high effort for short-term, and then just kind of slow burn after that.
I'd be fine with that. That feels appropriate. And that is an item we're talking about Thursday, is trying to get goals defined on what we want on our initial deliverables. So I think that would be easy to find.
I would love to vote on this once those goals are written down and the chart is updated.
Yeah, and a quick point of order: you don't actually have to wait for a formal TAC meeting. You can do that, emails and everything else. Email and so on can be used for voting. So,
yep.
Electronic voting is fine.
So I guess what I would do that I'd move that once you're ready, Krob, just please open a PR against the TAC proposal, and then link to the charter document. We can just do it via a GitHub one.
Yeah, and I also don't. Is anything actually blocked in your work, Krob, by us voting? No. So there's no rush either way then.
No.
Cool.
If anyone's interested in helping, we are always looking for assistance. And I am stubbed myself in as the leader of this group. If someone has a big passion and wants to take hold of the reins to steer our diagramming future, I would be glad to step back and just be a participant.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Krob. Looking next. Oh, sorry. Did you have something you wanted to say, David? Okay, guess not. All right. So moving on to the agenda, I think obviously the TAC is well aware, but I don't know if other participants are aware. The governing board and TAC had a meeting last Friday at the end of the Linux Foundation Member Summit. We had a few of the TAC members that were able to join in person, and the rest joined via Zoom. I want to try to time box this discussion at some level, but I did want to kind of go around amongst the TAC members and kind of poll for a sense of what they took away from the meeting, any outstanding questions that they might have, any objections or things that they'd like to emphasize that they heard that they loved, and really just use this as maybe an opportunity to kind of briefly recap. I do have a specific point around the technical vision that I want to come to, but before we jump to that, I guess I've just opened the floor for any thoughts or feedback. Not all at once. I'll go first then. I thought it was, first off, it was great just to have the governing board all together for a longer period of time. I thought both the content and the fluidity of conversation, I think was a much higher bandwidth than we've had in the past, which was amazing. I think there was kind of a general consensus in the room that we need to do it more often. Obviously in person if we can make it happen. You know, I think there were some pros and cons. I would say the pros were I think we had a great dialogue around the identity of the foundation, kind of framed underneath a lot of the interview feedback that Sam Ramji had gathered, which was characterized as kind of like, there are 4 different ideas around what the OpenSSF could become. They aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, but in really going through and talking about kind of where we focus today and where do we want to be in the long term, I think there was, at least in a lot of the hallway conversation afterwards, I think there was a greater appreciation for the breadth of activity that we are trying to undertake, and much of it obviously is being done right now within the projects and working groups. So I think there was definitely a raised level of awareness of both the complexity and the challenges that exist, and how much new ground we are fundamentally breaking with this foundation as compared to other open source entities that have or currently exist. I think cons, I think we did drive some good discussion around kind of general direction around resource allocation, as well as kind of some high level objectives for next year. I would have loved to have seen that conversation evolve even further. I think in general, there was, those of us deeply involved in the planning, was a sense of like, if we all come out and say we want to be everything to everyone, then that's not necessarily a great outcome. Having some level of focus and lines drawn, not to exclude things that aren't necessarily worthy, but just making sure that where we do invest, that we have impact, I think is important. And I think there was, again, maybe a tempering, I'll try to choose my words carefully here, a tempering of some of the appetite to do everything, but not necessarily a vehement, like, we're going to stop doing X so that we can really focus to do Y. I didn't get a sense that there was that level of conviction. You know, overall, I think, again, intent, looking for opportunities to make calls for action, you know, as well as calls for, you know, assistance for the TAC in terms of doing their job. I think was another area that it took me leaving the room and re-entering for those of you that weren't there. But the general consensus from the board was that, you know, they want a stronger portfolio view of what is it that the foundation is doing, and they want the TAC to be, you know, have a stronger voice. My response to that was, we all want that too. We need staff and time and energy, and frankly, we're all volunteers doing a million different things. If we want a dedicated outcome, we need to put dedicated people who are accountable to those outcomes, and use the TAC as an advisory and a subject matter expert group to make sure that it's directionally accurate for where we want to go, but we need more support in order to make that happen. I definitely heard an acknowledgement of that from the governing board, in so much as the budget that will be coming forward in December will have some hiring allocated to specifically that, making sure that we are enabled to have a stronger voice, be able to articulate that portfolio view of what the foundation is doing, and make sure that people really do understand how that maps to our identity and where we want to go. So I think those were all positives. But again, I want to open the floor for others to weigh in on things they liked, things they didn't like. Any just general feedback around how we can make the meeting better next go around would be welcome. So Crow, saw your hand first.
Yeah, I liked the analysis Sam did and the proposal of the four foundations, which was more like four principles. I think some of the wording threw participants off. I also think the fact that we had now 4 foundations and 7 working groups and 10 mobilization plan streams was confusing to many of the people in the room. And I think we'd be more successful next time if we found a way to, if we're going to work that through that methodology, to tie all that together in the front, so people it was clearly articulated to people how those different ideas, how they relate and intersect. So I think terminology, and then just the fact that, are we going with 4 streams now instead of the 10 mobilization things? I think that caused a little confusion for some folks. But I thought the content was worthwhile. I liked kind of how his thought process there.
For anyone who wasn't present, I just listed out those 4 pillars in the chat. Four foundations, sorry.
Yeah. Bob, should I go next? Oh,
I'm the one on mute, not you. I was wondering, like, why is no one hearing me? Sorry.
okay. Yeah. So the 10 million developer uplift was also called education, which, I mean, as a label is, I mean, it's okay, but if you actually read the text, it was education and guides and standards and so on. It really wasn't just education. I think, it was interesting to see the large amount of debate on how people viewed the importance of those different 4 areas. And there was definitely not complete consensus on anything. So, but I think to overstate what I heard as a general, though with exceptions, because as I said, there was no total agreement. Yeah, the discussion was definitely interesting. I think we came away with, number 1, tool chain, number 2, education / uplift, and that includes standards and guides and so on. And the funder first resort and rapid response force, I don't think I came away with everybody thought that was a horrible idea. It was just that they wanted to emphasize tool chain and education / guides and so on. And I think there was a little disagreement also on what the scope of this decision would be. At least for some folks in the room, I think there was thinking 2023. Other people thinking, hey, this is what OpenSSF wants to grow up when they grow up. But at least within the discussion groups on this, they were really only focused on 2023. And this is a decision, that can be like all decisions, we can recheck it next year because things can change. So I would come away with this was a emphasis for 2023. It might go forward further, but that's a different decision. And if I missed something, let me know.
No, thanks for that. Different David Edelson. Apologies if I mispronounced that. Go ahead.
That's good. Yeah, thanks very much. I mean, I was just curious. I mean, I didn't attend, but given the comment about Sterling Toolchain and that I'm coming from GCC and related to all the discussions about the Toolchain Infrastructure Initiative, I was curious if any for clarification or exposition.
Yeah, I'll take a stab and encourage others to speak up as well. I think if you look across the various projects and working groups that we have right now, there's already an emergence of a collection of maybe horizontally applicable tools. And when I say horizontal, meaning across different language ecosystems, different open source communities, different frameworks, really trying to address how do we do a more systemic job at raising out signals to consumers of open source that make it very clear the security posture, maintainer intent, and current status of the artifacts that they publish. And so while we want things to get more secure, we also want to respect and enable consumers to make more informed decisions. And so while we will certainly invest our effort and energy against a prioritization ranking of projects to try to make sure that we are having the most impact, we also kind of envision a world where, again, consumers are very informed, and the market can ultimately dictate where, which projects are the most popular versus not. We don't necessarily want to take a, have an extremely opinionated view in so much as, make sure that just the fundamentals are covered. People have the actual tools to do the right things that the industry generally agrees on. And then that can be sustained going forward. So when we talk about a tool chain, I think from, whether it's the GNU perspective or just in general, like how do we make sure that we're generating build provenance correctly? How do we make sure that digital signatures are being applied correctly? How do we make sure that package repositories and package managers have the right tools to be able to distribute content in a secure and meaningful way? Also looking at like the toolkit that's coming out of the Alpha Omega effort, as well as package analysis, the OSV service. I mean, there's already examples of kind of common capabilities that we're building out within the OpenSSF, and that it's more of a notion of, are we going to continue to be a bag of parts, or are we going to have a more of an integrated portfolio, to use kind of more of a corporate phrasing around it, set of capabilities. So with that, I'll pause and let others weigh in, as it's just my own personal characterization. But Krog, maybe.
I think your characterization was right, and I'm not sure everyone did the homework or took it with the. I took Sam's document as an aspirational statement. This is a theater of the possible. These are things we could do, and it could help us drive behavior. I didn't see it as we're going this route and we're only going to do tooling. Because like even the million developer uplift, while education is an aspect of that, developers need tools to help them. They need the forums to be able to collaborate and learn and try out new ideas. But I took Sam's statements, and maybe I'm wrong, but I took those as these are things, where we could take the foundation, not necessarily this is our shopping list for 2023. And I thought the exercise where we had a couple goose bucks to spend on each of the pillars, I think that might have helped. I don't know if it set the right tone for more of that. We didn't really settle on what our identity is, and I felt that would be important if we kind of can confirm like where we want to be, what we want to do as a group, a foundation. I think that would help logically. Things will start to fall into place after that. And I would have liked to focus a little more time on that than having Bresser spend 57 cents on something.
Did that? No, thanks for that, Crow. David, did that answer your question around the kind of the definition of a tool chain, or?
Well, I mean, somewhat. I mean, again, what I was trying to distinguish, and you mentioned was, whether this was about the tools that the OpenSSF itself is creating around security and provenance, everything, versus talking about the upstream tools or the user, tools of, okay, we want to create this, and honestly choose, but help to ensure that there is this, not idealized, but a more secure, more robust set of tools in all of these different ecosystems, which is sort of Sterling tool chain, at least that little 2-word phrase can be interpreted both ways. And so trying to clarify that.
Yeah, we're not definitely trying to force the world to use one programming language, one compiler, and like
No,
go down that
I
sort of
didn't
route at
mean that. I
all,
just
right?
meant in terms of,
No,
a idealized version of whether it's Rust, Node.js, Java. I mean, not a single one, but that you want to ensure that those upstream ecosystems are as secure as possible versus we want to create, the TAC and the OpenSSF want to create the tools, the capabilities that those communities can choose to use or not. And those are two, and another, maybe it's another definite, differentiation between what the OpenSSF wants to be when it grows up.
yeah. I would say our vision is that people are using the tools that we're creating, right? So like,
Oh, they are,
if we're not providing value, then that says a lot about where we're spending our time, right? But to your point, we're not trying to force or obligate anyone in the industry to go do anything. But we hope that by raising awareness and actually making specific investments and co-creating it with these, whether it's Eclipse or GNU or others, like helping to co-create it and making sure that we have best practices codified in the tools people are using. I think that is our vision in terms of
and just very briefly, I wanted to again thank the TAC very graciously and thank the governing board for the backstop you provided. And I and Carlos O'Donnell also thank you, and we'll report next month. But we're very grateful for the efforts to help spin up the toolchain infrastructure initiative so that we can actually create, implement best practices for the GNU toolchain. So thank you very much again for that.
Yeah, sure thing. David Wheeler.
Yeah, two quick additional notes. I did look over the the four pillars text, and it could be interpreted as there's one tool chain to rule them all, and I don't actually think that was intended. If anything, I think it was more of a the openness is of going to focus its resources on funding areas so that we get completion, good things that are useful as opposed to 10 things that aren't. Much more of a resource focus than I don't think anybody actually believes that there's going to be one programming language and one tool and we'll all use that singular one. I don't think anybody believes that. So you could interpret the text that way, but I don't think that was what was intended. One of the exercises that was mentioned earlier was we had a bunch of groups go out and said, hey, let's imagine these four pillars, assign dollars. And the goal was to try to make those uneven. In other words, not 25, 25, 25. Basically to try to prioritize, at least for the coming year. There were, I think, two people who had $100 on one single item. I don't even think it was the same item. But I think for most, I think it was more an exercise of prioritization. In other words, not that it was 100 and all the others 0, but, given limited resources, and we have some resources, but the job is huge. So what do we focus on for the next year? And I think that was really the point of the exercise. As I said, I came away thinking tooling number 1, education number 2, the others are not forbidden. It's just not what we're going to emphasize for the next year. And if that's a misunderstanding, let me know.
No, I think it's a great characterization of that. So just again, trying to be cognizant of time when we do have other things on the agenda. I'll say specifically around the pre-read that I sent out, both around the updated technical vision as well as the role of the TAC. I would like to take some of the feedback as well as the content of the pre-read that all TAC members have and make an update to PR 129, which was basically the project to update our technical vision. So I guess based on the meeting last week and some of the other conversations that we've had, I'd like to update that PR and give it to the TAC members to ultimately take one last final noodle on. And if we need more conversation, that's great. But if we feel like we do have consensus around the vision now, given all of this context, I think we may be able to move to get that merged and have that be another feather in our cap per se to close out the year on a high note and shift into more of an execution mode next year. So I'll be pushing those updates this week and would encourage feedback and discussion in that PR. Last point I will make on last week's meeting is we do have a governing board meeting coming up on December 1st. All TAC members should already have an invite on their calendar to participate. Imagining that's going to be a fairly lengthy discussion given the budget and given other things, but we'll as soon as we have the agenda lined up with Brian, we will send that out. Last call for any questions on last week's meeting. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and move on to other topics on today's agenda. It's twice sold. All right. Cool. Next on the agenda was more of a reminder for me, but to bring up with all of you as well. I think we had the good work done earlier this year around, just going off of PR numbers, project PR 112, but essentially it was a project lifecycle associated with the foundation. I think it is another lofty goal for the end of this year that's worth doing, is going through and making sure that we have appropriate characterizations of the existing projects within the foundation as to their state of sandbox, incubating, graduated, or archived. I recently pushed up a PR to update the table of all of our projects on the TAC repo, which all of you +1, and we did merge, which I do appreciate. But I do think we need to go back and make sure that we have that conversation with the individual projects themselves, and also raise up you know, the benefits that we, the TAC, would like our projects to fundamentally have, and also take that as input into some of the staffing and budget conversations for next year. So maybe more of a call to action. We'll be, I guess what I would propose, and looking for TAC member feedback on this, I would propose that maybe we either have an explicit conversation with working group leads, or ask them to self-nominate a status of where they believe the project to currently sit relative to the criteria, and then we can have an explicit conversation at the next TAC meeting, or electronically, whatever folks want to do. But we could have individual PRs, or just batch them up into one final PR, to where we can have clarity going out through the end of the year around where does everything stand in the foundation, so that we start kind of fresh without that debt, that technical debt in 2023. So Krog, I see your hand up.
I 1000% agree we should do this. I have zero bandwidth to self-manage that across all the work I'm wrapped up with, and I would need some fairly significant project management assistance on helping me walk through all that. But I think it's an amazing thing, and we absolutely should do that. And I'm just a slacker.
I don't know that I would call you that, but I think time management is certainly a critical component of this. I think having just a table that's all listed there would certainly be there. We could certainly start with a self-nomination, and then the TAC essentially needs to you know, go through an evaluation process around where we feel like if our nominations are appropriate, or if we need to make revisions. Ultimately, I think it's the TAC's role to make that determination. So I see Jay offering to help with this, so that would certainly be appreciated. But I guess just starting an email out to the working group leads and asking for them to submit a nomination. We don't have a TAC meeting in 2 weeks. We have one a month from now. So that actually gives us a little bit of buffer time to hopefully assemble this, and we're not under a lot of pressure to get it done within a week. But I guess that's what I would move, is we could send out an email to working group leads this week, set a deadline by the end of the month per se, and then look to tabulate that, and then give the TAC a week or two to review it and go from there. If that sounds good to all, I would call for any objections on that approach. See, thumbs up from Krob. Seeing no other emojis or comments to the negative, so Luke, thumbs up all across. Okay, great. So we'll look to get that done. I already spilled the beans on the next meeting item, which is we do not have a TAC meeting in 2 weeks due to the holiday and availability at that time in the US. We will have a meeting, as I mentioned, the governing board meeting on the 1st, and then we have a TAC meeting coming up on 4 weeks from today. So that will be our last meeting for 2022. I believe we do have a meeting on the 13th, which, as David mentioned, we will have the GNU toolchain infrastructure or initiative. I always forget which the I stands for, whether it's the infrastructure or initiative, but whatever the letter stands for, we'll have them join and give an update. At that point, we'll be asking the end users working group to give an update, since we have not heard from them since their creation. But we'll look to drive that, as well as maybe the formal votes on some of the other items if we have not dealt with them electronically. So just a heads up there. David, I see your hand up.
Yeah, it's the toolchain infrastructure project, and the G is silent now.
Okay,
What?
cool. Awesome. All right. Let's see. See, Michael Scavetta had added something in here around assurance assertions. So, Michael, over to you.
Yeah, I just threw this on, so this was kind of unplanned, but want to give everybody the heads up that through AO, we're looking at essentially creating assertions that assurance work has been done. So we've done a code review of a thing, we've run a tool against a thing, we've verified it's reproducible, we've done a thing. We want to communicate that out in a way that is not a spreadsheet or a list or a website that you have to search on. Assertions seem like a reasonable kind of way to do it. The way that I've internalized what else is out there is that like things like in toto assertions are the envelope that a statement could be inside of. What we're talking about is the statement, and my video died, but I hope you guys can still hear me. So yep. The types of assertions that we're looking for are, as I said, no critical vulnerabilities were found. No critical CVEs are known as of this date, and it's time stamped because that's in the assertion and it's signed and all that stuff. So it's a very early experiment. We don't even have proof of concept, but the API surface would basically be: you generate an assertion of a type against a package, you store it someplace public, and then other folks can consume it by saying, I run this policy against this set of assertions for a subject, the npm left ped. So that so the magic is in the policy. So the policy says all of the projects that I use must be reproducible. None of them can have unpatched critical CVE or whatnot. So we're working through the conversation of what should be in there. Should we embed evidence? Should we not embed evidence? Should we include details or not details? Are you trusting is this about transparency, or is this about trusting a third party to do a thing? That's happening in the issue 28 under the AO site. There was a MVSR that kind of describes what we're trying to do. Feedback very much appreciated. So to be super clear, I am not trying to step on the toes of in toto or skit or salsa or S2C2F or anything else. If I am, it is accidental, and please let me know. I would very much like to align this work with many of those, and enable, for example, scorecard, essentially running scorecard and then providing the output of that as an assertion, so that you have a time-stamped, as of this date, scorecard says X, and things like that. But I would like this wrapped up in a larger assertion packaging, enveloping, time-stamping format, so that I don't have to worry about that. I can just worry about the chocolatey goo on the inside. That's what I got. So just want to let you guys know, heads up, feedback very much appreciated, even if this is a terrible idea. But
no, appreciate the idea. I guess the one question that may be premature from my side is, where would you envision this living? still underneath Alpha Omega, or just more generically within the OpenSSF as a proper project under a working group, I guess, or is it just too early to tell?
I think it's too early, but it doesn't feel like it should live under AO long term. I think in order to, you know, to incubate it to the point that there's something real or real-ish, sure. But I think it's more general. I mean, the itch that I'm trying to scratch very tactically is we're going to do a lot of things with particularly Omega, and we need to communicate that out. So the format, you know, the goal of it is to sorry, one of the goals of the project is to do that for Omega, but it is not intended just for Omega. So if it belongs someplace else eventually, that's you know, awesome.
Hey, very interesting. One just really quick question. Where can we find out more and get involved in things like this?
So there are 3 links in the TAC meeting notes. Right now, the best place is just to join the conversation on the issue. We're going to talk. We've been talking about it in the Identifying Security Threats Working Group meeting. So the next meeting of that would be a great way to get involved. Or if you just want to have a deeper conversation, happy to have that anytime. But I think most of the back and forth is in the issue right now.
All right. Any other questions for Michael?
Could you link to the issue? Unless I've missed it.
It's a conversation at OSSF Alpha. I don't know. Maybe my
Slack.
Google Docs is
Number
not
28.
Oh, on the doc. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
My apologies. I got it. Okay.
Yeah, it's issue 28 in Alpha Omega, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Put it in the chat as well.
Thank you.
All right. Any other topics from TAC members for today? Jennifer Bly, go ahead.
Well, I'm not a TAC member, but I did want to bring up briefly that we are working on our first annual report for OpenSSF as a whole. And so have asked for contributions from each of the working groups, sort of the highlights that, you know, have been accomplished this year. So just wanted to point that out, that's in progress, and hoping to wrap that up in the next week or so, at least the initial feedback on what to include there. So I wanted to make sure the TAC was aware.
No, appreciate that. That's my bad for not not parsing through the emails and reminding folks. I appreciate you keeping me honest, Jennifer. All right. Any other points of discussion? Otherwise, I will end with a thank you to all the TAC members. I know it's been a very busy last several months of getting things done, culminating with a fair bit of good discussion last week. So appreciate everyone's engagement and help, and look forward to getting a little bit of a break next week, and also then reconvening ahead of the governing board meeting on the 1st. Jay, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, just a quick reminder. We posted Jennifer was kind enough to send the blog post for the S2C2F contribution to the OpenSSF to the TAC private email, and Abhishek was kind enough to go in there and throw some comments in. But if anybody else has some comments, you know, today would be the day to do it, as we are planning to resolve some of those and then kind of try to get it out tomorrow. So if anyone else has any more comments, and we greatly appreciate them, go ahead and make your comments or give a thumbs up or something, just so that we have a consensus from the TAC that it's good to go.
All right. Thanks for the reminder. Certainly second, if folks haven't taken a look at that, please do. All right, with that, we'll end 5 minutes early. Thanks everybody for the engagement today, and we will see everybody else out there. Take care.